Now Micah Miller trying to spring a pass ahead. Nobody in front of Jack Paling. Moves on with a blast and scores! Jack Paling with
We aren't giving up on chances, and we just got to bottom line execute.
Waits, passes in front. Great save, Pelosi, as she robs a Gopher in front of her. And that was number 8, Kippen Keller, on the grade A opportunity.
For me as a coach, that's the kind of D you're always looking for, because they don't grow on trees for sure. And he's done a really good job being a captain of a really young team this year.
It was a really cool thing to see for them to really appreciate what I've done on and off the ice.
to the far half wall. Jack Paling trying to play it into the corner. Now Paling turns, squares his body to the slot, sends it up high toward Jack. A shot makes its way through, and they score! Right along the blue line, Nick Paling was in front of the net, and St. Cloud State's got a lead here in the
And welcome back to the Den, Husky Warming House podcast fans. It is episode number 36. I'm Nick Maxon, joined alongside Noah Grant. In this week's episode, we are joined by one of the new assistant captains for the St. Cloud State men's hockey team. We're going to go over Center Ice View news and notes and plenty of action around the National Hockey League, and then also do a double minor giveaway. It is that time of the year. But Noah, before we begin the show today, we do have an announcement for our listeners as well as our viewers on YouTube. We're going to be having an off week next week. We've been doing this basically nonstop every week since March. We are going to be doing some different creating stuff here coming up in the next couple of weeks, some new stuff that we're going to be testing and creating. So stay tuned for that. And to do so, we just need, a little time to kind of practice and try to get some stuff together. So we appreciate the support. Again, next week, no show, but we will still have a trivia question, so stay tuned for that. Noah, it is, again, it is early November. It's not October anymore. All the days just pretty much are flowing together in my head. How things been for you?
Yeah, well, I think it's safe to say it's been a crazy week for everyone, just given the state of affairs in the world. It's been all right. Did you happen to check out that video of wherever it was? Was it over in Russia? The video of the guy celebrating and he went through the glass? I mean, glad he wasn't hurt. But...
I saw the video. I don't know where it was from, but I think there's nobody more shocked than I was when, the glass just literally exploded. And, it's not like, a solid pane where it's in the NHL and maybe just, caught out of the stanchions. It just literally just popped. You would have thought that someone attached a freaking little major explosion to it. And I think no one was more surprised than he was when he went through the glass and out to outside the rink. Funny video, but definitely unexpected, that's for sure.
It's a good thing, to be honest with you, especially with a lot of those European, I guess, non-North American rinks, that they actually don't have fans up along the dasher there, because obviously, in an NHL rink, that could be very, very scary in terms of a player going, head over heels with skates flying into the crowd, obviously. But yeah, everything was fine, and I don't know, it gave me a chuckle. But like I said, this week it's been something. Yeah, I think that's just the best the best way to put it. But maybe that transitions well into our next segment, Nick. We're going to probably just jump right into Goal Line Gripes. I suppose I should ask you before we do that, how are you doing on this Friday?
Oh, thanks for asking. I'm doing pretty good. It's been warm here in the Twin Cities. It's been mid to upper 60s, well, some lower 70s. And this is November 6th. Last week it was record cold for Halloween, and now it's record heat. Only in Minnesota could you not have your dosage right when it comes to the weather. So just in and out. It's been crazy.
Oh, snow's coming though.
It is. We're gonna get a reality check next week, it looks like. Unfortunately, these good things in Minnesota don't last, especially this time of the year. We're definitely going to enjoy tomorrow. It looks like the last picturesque day of fall before things kind of trend towards more normal for November. But I've been doing pretty good. We have some good news for some hockey, what we'll discuss later. But no, I'm going to press it to you for our Goal Line Gripe segment because I know you're charged about it. So I want to give you the opportunity to start first.
Goal Line Gripes. What the... Yeah, starting with Goal Line Gripes, like you mentioned, I will start first. Charged, yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I'm almost more disappointed, to be honest with you. So my gripe this week, it does center around the election, okay? And we're going to get ever so slightly political here. I'm going to reveal a little bit more about myself than I probably should, but that's okay. So if you follow me on Twitter, or on Facebook or wherever, I'm just going to state this outright, which this is probably the gutsiest part of this. So in this week's election, I voted for Joe Biden. That is who I voted for. That is what it is. Okay, that was my choice as a candidate. And I can feel that if you didn't vote for Joe Biden already and you're listening to this segment, I can feel your ire start to rise a little bit for a lot of people. And that is my gripe here. We all live in the same country, right? If you're American, we all live in the same country. And it is 110% not only okay, but arguably encouraged to have differing points of view. There is no human being on the planet that follows partisan lines to a T. That just doesn't exist. So my particular gripe here happens to honestly go with, and I think this happens in sports a little bit too, when we get into our discussions and have some disagreements, and it's okay. That's okay to have those disagreements. But what I'm trying to get at is I really have a problem when people are not objective in the discussion, and moreover, when they are not objective, they turn to attacking the person rather than the topic. And I know that's something that is very, very common in the social media world. We've talked about it for ages and ages and ages. But I think this week especially really reveals that in a lot of people and a lot of friendships that end up not becoming friendships by the end of the week. You know, I think it's important to have a lot of these discussions that we're having within our nation, both politically and sports, but more so politically. But I do not understand, and I will continue to not understand, that if you disagree with me and I make a point to you or you make a point to me and the other person responds with something that says that someone is dumb, they're an idiot, they're high, they're delusional, how could you do this? How could you believe in such a thing? That's where, for me, it just really irks me. It irks me to the point of we don't listen to each other anymore in this country, and I think that's why we're as divisive as we are, unfortunately. But, I think about this. We've had many, many presidents, obviously, 45 presidents in the United States since, George Washington was first president. Whether they're Republican, whether they're Democrat, I think up until, obviously up until 2000 and beyond, all of these presidents, for the most part, were good men. You might not have agreed with them on policy, you might not have agreed with their agenda so much, but they had not their own self-interest, but the best interest of the nation and its people in mind. And they intended to try to make the nation a better place and try to listen and be constructive. And I think recently, to be honest with you, and obviously my vote reflects that, I think we've really gotten away from that. I think we've gotten to the point where it's me, my perception matters than yours. And if you don't align with my perception, then you're an idiot, then you suck. And we don't get anywhere with that. And this is a long-winded gripe, and probably I'm going too long with this. But at the end of the day, I'm really upset with people not listening to each other and acknowledging that, hey, I feel this way about abortion. You feel this way about abortion. Let's talk about it. And at the end, we're probably going to agree to disagree because we're probably not going to change each other's minds. We talked about it. Let's go have a beer together. That's my gripe. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Nick. I don't know if that was too heavy, but it just irks me that people have gotten away from understanding that there are values that make us all American regardless of party lines.
I think it's, I'm just going to have a brief comment, but I think it comes down to where almost it's exposing that the two-party system is inherently flawed.
Yep.
And the problem with that is we don't have, say, a large enough third, if not fourth party, libertarian, green, progressive, whoever you want it to be, right? It doesn't matter. At the end of it, what was the line of Batman Begins? It's like, like the Joker, he was the opposite of Batman, right? And it was like, without you, you're, or your opposite, you're basically nothing, right? And if you really take a step back and dissect it, as much as there's fighting, and I put that in quotes, between the two, they feed off of each other to maintain a majority power. Because if you think about a guy like Bernie Sanders, although he resides Democratic, he pretty much, he's not a establishment Democrat as we know. In fact, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that there's been multiple attempts to pretty much lead him away from the Democratic Party. My point being, these two are doing what they're doing to essentially control the United States. At the end of it, they're not perfect. Both ways aren't. And at the end of it, do we want it to change? Yes. But at the end of it, there's no check on those two either. And from us as citizens, honestly, you're right. We have lost the ability to listen. We've lost the foresight to focus on the policy issues at play and not just you're right, I'm wrong and whatnot. And again, it's, how do we solve a debt problem? I may have an idea of whether it's tax increase, tax decrease, or whatever the heck case might be. How do we not ship jobs overseas? We all have ideas in that. Well, let's focus on the ideas and come up with a game plan with that instead of, just immediately charging to the bit. We've lost the focus on the prize, right? Instead, we're fighting amongst each other against the silly things. So that's my response to that. My gripe, cold French fries. My gripe on that, cold fries. There's nothing worse, Noah, than having a meal in your car. It's cold outside. You bite into a nice, juicy, warm hamburger. The cheese is melted. You got the nice, savory ketchup. You put your hand into the bag of fries, and it's just mush. It's cold. And those things have probably been sitting underneath the heat lamp for, 10, 12, 15 minutes? And it sucks. It takes the wind out of my sails, man. I'm telling you. Over salty. It sounds silly, but it sucks. Cold French fries is the worst. I can't dip them in ketchup. I can't put them in seasoned sour cream. That's my gripe. It is nothing compared to what's going on in North America and the world today. Nothing. That's my first world problem is cold French fries. I just hate it. I like them fresh out of the fryer. I like them hot and crispy, and they better darn well be that way or else I'm not a happy camper.
Isn't that what this podcast is? Hot and crispy? I don't know. I'm really glad that I went first at the end of the day.
It's true. Seriously, it's one of those where it's because the first thing you do is, honestly, you get a bag from whatever favorite fast food it is. If you eat fast food, you're not going to take out the sandwich right away. You're going to try a fry. It's because it's easy. Oh, I can grab a fry and I'm driving, no big deal. And if that thing is cold and wilty and crappy, it just blows the whole meal just completely out the door. You might as well just chuck it out the window and go back and beg for your money back, honestly. So
I take back what I said about social media. You can definitely. you can definitely at Nick Maxon on this one and give him all the hate that you want. No, I mean, I totally agree.
I think I'll have a lot of people agree with me on this one, especially if you're like a person who likes to dip their fries in like some kind of an ice cream treat, like a shake or a malt. Like, I don't do that, but so a lot of people do.
Hey,
well, it's got to be warm because it's the warm and the cold, right? If it's just cold and cold, it's just like, okay, what am I eating? Just soggy potatoes? No, get that crap out of here.
Hey, I mean, I totally agree with you. And also, if you're going to dip any fry in anything, it's got to be a Frosty from Wendy's if you're going to dip fries in. But I guess before we jump on to our two-line fan trivia, Nick, I mean, do you have like a favorite fry, like a favorite, fast food chain fry? And leaving out some, like local things like Val's in St. Cloud. I think they're fantastic, but they're not a giant chain. So we're
a national chain.
Yeah. So for me, to be honest with you, I know everyone loves McDonald's. For me, I think it's Culver's. I think Culver's with their butter burgers and the combination of their crinkle fries or whatever, I think they make a fantastic fry. They're not out of this world, I would say, but in terms of how they relate to how good the burgers are, I don't think you leave Culver's disappointed with the status of the fry, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of places like Hardee's and the like, they might have a great burger, but their fries really bring them down at the end of the day.
True. I like the Culver's fries. The McDonald's fries are always a classic, but they're so hit or miss on the quality of them. That's kind of where the gripe comes from, because it's like they're usually pretty consistent on most else. Now, when I say consistent, I don't mean they're consistently good. I'm just saying they're consistent. Another one that Freddy's has got some good shoestring fries as well. Similar burgers to Culver's, if I may mean hashtag. No ads here per se, but that would be another favorite of mine. Is just, sometimes that this nice little shoestring one is got that extra crunch and it's pretty good.
Yeah, in terms of specialty things, I would probably pick Raisin Cane's with that special sauce that they have. If you're talking about like fries that are amplified by said surroundings, but
Are we talking about gripes or, I mean, what happened here? I mean, just honestly.
I was just about to move on. We're talking about the environment of fries here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Probably why we're taking a week off. It might be warranted. Anyway, we're gonna move on to two-line fan trivia. Nick, we did have a winner this week, as always.
Two-line fan trivia is your chance to win. Follow the Huskies Warming House podcast on Twitter at Warming House Den. A new question will be asked every week. Be the first to tweet us the correct answer. Winners will be mentioned on the show, as well as a chance for prizes and more. One question, one answer, one winner. It's two-line trivia.
Nick, two-line fan trivia. This one involves last week's guest and a really good interview we had with Kenzie Wiley and McKenna Westlow. McKenna Westlow tallied her first collegiate point actually against the St. Cloud State women's hockey team while playing for Ohio State in her freshman year. After a redshirt sophomore season, she tallied her first regular season goal last year against which opponent? Do not count the exhibition game. Nick, do you happen to remember the answer to this one? This is
Lindenwood?
Yes, it is Lindenwood. Somebody probably looked at the tweet, I'm guessing. That is a good one, but Lindenwood is correct with a pretty twisted wrist or action shot and a really good action shot of the photo that we do have on our Twitter page and, of course, on our YouTube page right now. If you're watching the Huskies Warming House podcast, obviously tune in every week for more apparel chances and see if you can catch our winner, which was at Fight the Pants, who is still at number 3 on the leaderboard. And the race is getting close here, Nick. Fight the Pants, sitting at 3rd place with 3 wins. Tinner Heath, his buddy, only at 4 wins moving into the weekend here, Nick. And then, of course, Brody Falconer taking the cake at 7 wins. So things are tightening up in terms of the leaderboard. We could see a little bit of action in the coming week. But speaking of apparel, Nick, I think this is a perfect time to jump into what you had mentioned a little bit earlier, and that is our new double minor giveaway segment, which we will announce in the first show of every month, which would be November 6th, Friday, our first show of November. And in our double minor giveaway, we will be giving away 2 Huskies Warming House podcast t-shirts. Now, a little bit of caveats to this. This will be for our Twitter followers only. So all you have to be doing is follow us on Twitter in order to be eligible to win one of these t-shirts. The only way you are not eligible to win otherwise is if you've already won a t-shirt. So our winners from the Road to 300 apparel giveaway, Brett Hayter, Team Euro Disney, Alex Curtis, A Curtis 0724, 1 Rogers EHS, JC Larson 02, Mike _ Lutz 13, and Matthew Semich are all not eligible to win. So if you are one of our 2 winners in today's show, you will then be taken off of the board for a t-shirt. Now, when I mentioned those winners, we mentioned our trivia winners just a moment ago. Fight the Pants, Brody Falconer, Tinner Heath. They have all won Huskies Warming House podcast hats. They are still eligible to win a Huskies Warming House podcast t-shirt. So, Nick, does that all make sense to you?
I hope so.
All right. We're gonna pull up the web page here that we're going to do our drawing. 296 names in this one, Nick. Of course, it does not include any of our corporations or things like the St. Cloud State men's hockey team, but Brett Larson, as you can see here, is in the drawing. So Brett Larson could be a winner here, but we're going to jump right into it here, Nick. Our first winner is going to be, both of our winners are listed in here. So at Hockey IQ Academy and at Gina Carlson are going to be our 2 winners. I believe Hockey IQ Academy is a person that does run the academy. So we will check in on that one and double check, Nick. But those are going to be our 2 winners of our double minor giveaway. Stay tuned in our first week in December to potentially win another t-shirt, Nick. How about that?
Pretty fun. And again, thanks to all of our followers on Twitter and across all of our social media platforms for continuing your unwavering support. So we appreciate it. This is a way of giving back, and congratulations to this month's winners. Can't wait for do it again in December, Noah.
Yeah, that was awesome. I don't know why I'm talking so slow. We're going to speed things with.
That was very unlike you. You almost went like too professional there. It was weird.
Oh my goodness, I know, right? Anyway, Center Ice View news and notes coming your way.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
And this week, Noah, on Center Ice View News and Notes, plenty of stuff to get a hold of, but the first order of business is finally the WCHA on the women's side announced their schedule. Plenty of stuff to talk about, as well as an update on the COVID Cup, Noah. So if you want to fill in listeners on those two line items first.
Yeah, the WCHA announced the start of the 2020-21 season, which will begin on November 20th for our St. Cloud State women's hockey team. They will not play new edition St. Thomas in the first half of this year's season, but who they will play here, Nick, their first two series will be at home. They will start the season on November 20th and 21st against Bemidji State, a team that they last beat at home in overtime in the last regular season game at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center last season. And then the following weekend, in November 27th and 28th, they will be at home against Minnesota State Mankato, the only team that they did beat on the road in WCHA action last season as well. Then they will travel December 4th and 5th to the University of Minnesota Duluth, and then finish the first half of the season at Bemidji State once again, December 11th and 12th. Don't forget as well, Nick, men's hockey, as of tonight, starts in 25 days, Tuesday, December 1st, in Omaha in the pod/bubble. 40 total games will be played throughout for the NCHC in that pod, with 10 for each team. In regards to the COVID Cup, like you mentioned, we have some interesting developments here, Nick. So today, November 6th, on Friday, Team Newland beat Team Geyer in overtime by a score of 5-4, and Team Westlow beat Team Cornelius by a score of 2-1. What does that mean for our bracket as we move into our final week of play, where the two highest seeds play the two lowest seeds? Well, you got to do a little bit of math for this one here, Nick, because Team Geyer failed to register a single win thus far in the tournament. So, interesting caveats to this. Team Newland, so it's decided by goal differential, I should say. So Team Newland slots into the number one spot in the championship game with 11 total goals, and they will play Team Cornelius in the number 2 spot with 9 goals. Here's where it gets kind of interesting, Nick. Of course, the number one tiebreaker, as we mentioned, is wins. Team Westlow has wins, but has only scored 5 goals. But they will play Team Geyer, who did not have a win and will slot into the 4 spot in that bronze medal game. They have 8 total goals. So kind of interesting to see how that bronze medal game shakes out with Team Geyer, who played a pretty tough overtime loss today, and should be an interesting bronze medal game. Nick, between Team Westlow and Team Geyer, and then Team Newland versus Team Cornelius, who do you have in those matchups?
I have Westlow. Because, it's been a defensive first type of style for them. And it's obvious, right? I mean, it's not how many you score, it's how many you also limit your opponents as well. The other matchup, that's a critical one. You said it was Cornelius. For my 34-year-old brain is going nuts here today.
Team Cornelius and Team Newland.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Team Newland on this one. Newland is kind of a gamer. She's also a clutch performer. I'm going to say Team Newland's going to come through for that squad. She's going to deposit an overtime winning goal, which is going to send that team to their 4th win and therefore onto the championship round.
Yeah, so Team Newland has a chance to clinch the COVID Cup championship next weekend. And I agree with you on that pick. Team Westlow loses to Team Geyer in that bronze medal game. I think it's very hard to put a team away 4 games in a row and go on a 4-game losing streak. So for me, I think Team Geyer finds a way to beat Team Westlow in that bronze medal game. So, should be interesting. Obviously, tune in, follow the St. Cloud State women's hockey page on Facebook and Twitter, and get ready for the upcoming season. Really excited to have the WCHA actually starting before the men's start in December, so exciting there. Moving on to another league in the OHL, the Ontario Premier Doug Ford has weighed in on the OHL, potentially banning body checking in the league's return to play. Of course, Lisa McLeod, who is Ontario's Minister of Sport, has said on Friday that, quote, prolonged or deliberate contact while playing sports is not permitted, end quote. Doug Ford, the Ontario Premier, has said, I would like to see the OHL return as normal as possible with body checking. We did mention that the OHL was slated for a February start date on our last show. They are now targeting a December start date for its current season. This is kind of interesting. You have a little bit of policy versus a little bit of hockey policy, Canadian policy, whatever you want to call it. Nick, I mean, what are your thoughts on this one? Obviously, hockey is played with body checking, and of course that's a very vulnerable age in terms of developing for some of these guys to get ready to jump directly into the National Hockey League. What do you think on this one?
Well, first of all, body checking is twofold, right? It's, you're taught in your younger years not only how to obviously give a safe check, but also how to receive a check, right? So it's also not putting yourself in a vulnerable position. And hockey is a physical sport. It's a collision sport. And it's part of, how you slow down a fast team. It's also part of, chipping the puck in and going to get it. It's hockey is a game of battles, right? And hockey is a game of inches because of those physical battles. And what constitutes body checking? What if I go into the corner, we both just happen not to hit each other, but we're in close proximity in a stick battle? Are they really, what's the whole idea, right? So we know that Canada, since the pandemic has began, right, that they've been very, very, you want to call it conservative, very just tight on their restrictions. They're trying to get, this pandemic behind us as well as we are here in the States. They've had their border closed basically since March, except if you have some type of an exception. And I get from the perspective of the Ontario's Minister of Sport that guess what? We're trying to just keep this thing on lockdown. If you want to play hockey, okay, but here's the thing. But at what point is it worth it at that point to play hockey, right? I want to skate. You want to skate. We want to see good, clean hockey, right? But if you take away physicality out of the game and body checking, it's not the same sport. It just isn't. There's not the competition and the battle intensity that you're going to see. So it's interesting. As you mentioned, it's policy in health and safety versus a sport. And from what I gather, the Ontario Minister of Sport has been very, very, stuck in the concrete of where their position is. I'm not quite sure how this is going to play out, but to me, if you're going to have arguably the best junior and NHL league that is producing NHL talent at a young age, change an entire style of game so they can play, but play what they would call safe, I just don't see how that benefits, the development, as you mentioned, of young players. I don't see how the fans like that type of game that they would watch and see. I just don't see it good for the sport. I don't see it as good for Canada, a nation who loves the game and all aspects of the game. I just don't know where it's all going to go. There has to be some give by both sides. I'm not sure what that is, but we'll have to watch and see where that goes.
I think the thing to remember, too, is when you talk about should hockey, even be going on at this particular point if they can't, find a way to rectify this issue. I mean, it raises a lot of bigger questions that go above the, the sport of just hockey and the OHL. And I think back to when you talk about the OHL being an NHL, preparing almost NHL ready league in terms of, the toughness. There's a lot of fights, obviously, in the OHL and especially the WHL. You think about European skaters that come over from playing, in a non-North American market. One of the biggest question marks for a lot of these players is that that type of play over in Europe is a lot more fluid and a lot less physical. So, it's a real issue, especially in terms of development. And like you mentioned, a lot of time and space out there when you know that you're not going to have a defenseman barreling down ready to light you up. And it's also difficult to get out of the mindset of finishing a check if you're a power forward where that's your style of game. So should be very, very interesting to see how that battle plays out. Speaking of another battle here, Nick, and one that we forgot to mention last week, a battle that was lost at age 57, Joey Moss, longtime Edmonton Oilers locker room presence, passed away. Edmonton artist A.J. Luden painted a mural on the graffiti wall in the Macaulay neighborhood this week to honor him. Of course, if you don't know the story, Joey had Down syndrome and spent 70 seasons combined between the Edmonton Oilers and Edmonton football team. He began working for the Oilers in 1984. Wayne Gretzky actually met him while dating Moss's sister Vicky, and from there Gretzky introduced him to the team, and of course he's been a locker room equipment presence from there. He sang "O Canada" quite a bit on numerous occasions in terms of just games and fundraisers and such. The NHL Alumni Association awarded him their 7th Man Award in 2003, given to those who behind-the-scenes efforts make a difference in the lives of others. In 2015, he was inducted into the Alberta Sports Hall of Fame, and this society here, Nick, which I had never heard of, but this is pretty darn cool, the Professional Hockey Athletic Trainers Society and Society of Professional Hockey Equipment Managers honored him at their 2017 meetings. I didn't know those types of things existed, but really happy that Joey Moss was with us for 57 years and really touched and inspired everyone that he came in contact with.
He really did. And, this really does exemplify the hockey community. And I think where the hockey community still needs to trend more, and the fact that we can see that it can do really good things. You have to remember too that, I guess with a developmental disability that Down syndrome is, back in the 70s and 80s, I mean, it was looked at completely different than it is now, right? So the fact that the Oilers, and especially a gentleman like Wayne Gretzky of his character, his caliber, I should say, right? There was nothing that he had to do what he did. And the organization, could they have just said, oh, this is great, give him, maybe a one-time thing? No, they took a gentleman who had a passion for the game. They gave him an opportunity to live a normal life. They welcomed him with grace. They gave him support. And for someone with his, disability, he got to experience something that for someone who is here maybe in the States or elsewhere would not normally get to experience a life that he did. It's that kind of support that all sports, including hockey, need to do more of, to give people that are maybe, less fortunate, if that's maybe I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but maybe have some challenges that they can help them succeed. And I think, again, going back to the Hockey Diversity Alliance, I think there's definitely some steps that they can take from this and learn from it and try to apply to what they're trying to accomplish. It's just it's a heartwarming story about what the hockey community, what the Edmonton Oilers and the city of Edmonton and the province of Alberta have done to really embrace them. Again, a mural going up. It sounds like Edmonton is planning some type of celebration as well for when the season kicks off at whatever date we have not yet to be determined. I think it's well deserved, and I think the hockey community again shows its strength in its community aspects here well with this story.
Mentioning the National Hockey League, the WCHA, and the NCHC, we mention all three of those leagues because we're trying something a little bit new here as we anticipate the start of the WCHA season followed by the NCHC. Of course, at our root, we are a St. Cloud State hockey podcast, so we intend as the season starts to kind of use the bulk of this Center Ice View News and Notes time to really dive a little bit deeper into our college hockey teams. With that being said, we are going to make sure that we keep you up to date in the happenings around the National Hockey League with a segment that we call the 5-Minute Major NHL Roundup, and it's our goal to round up most of the NHL topics in 5 minutes. So Nick, let's get started with our first one. The NHL itself won't consider anything less than 48 games if the league plays a shortened campaign in the upcoming season. They're targeting that January 1st start date, and they'd love to award the Stanley Cup before the Summer Olympics begin on July 23rd, but the league says that it's not necessary in terms of making a season work in the end. And starting off with some signings and injury news around the National Hockey League, we'll start in Michigan, an important state obviously this week, but also important to the Detroit Red Wings, who re-signed their RFA pretty much core piece and prospect Anthony Mantha for 4 more years at $5.7 million average annual value. Was almost a point per game player, 38 points in 43 games played this year. Missed parts of the season with a punctured lung, though, so obviously looking to make sure that he can return to form, but he's almost on pace for that 48-game season, I would suppose. He should be primed and ready for that. Nick, I'd say this is probably the biggest one on our list here. What do you like about Anthony Mantha's game, and how important is it for Stevie Yzerman and the Detroit Red Wings to lock him up for 4 more years?
He's kind of the new age Johan Franzen, right? He's kind of the mule. He kind of does a little bit of everything. He's a big body. He's got good hands for his size. He's got decent speed. And he's a guy that's not afraid to mix it up too when need be. He's a good net front presence too, and with good shots. So he's a good utility player. He's a guy that any team would want on their roster. And the fact that he was able to get him to a nice 4-year contract to remain a Red Wing was good for Stevie Y. A good, as you mentioned, concrete piece to try to build a roster off of with him, and as well as Dylan Larkin. So it's a good re-sign there for the Red Wings.
A forward and 2 defensemen cap our big signing list here, starting with the forward in the Big Apple, New York City. The Rangers and Strome agreed on a 2-year deal, $9 million, 59 points in 70 games this year. He was a 5th overall pick of the New York Islanders back in 2011. Spent a little bit of time with the Edmonton Oilers, of course, in that trade for Ryan Spooner. And this is kind of a steal, I think, for the Rangers, having a guy that kind of reinvigorated his game, so to speak, last year. A little bit of a, I wouldn't say a prove it to me contract, but just can you continue that consistent pace, especially during a flat cap, and then you're going to get your payday if you continue on that pace. Speaking of the Islanders, Nick, Ryan Pulock agreed to a 2-year deal at $10 million. It's a backloaded contract, so the first year is $3.33 million and the second year at $6.67. He had 35 points last year to pace all Islanders defensemen. And the other defenseman on this list, the Florida Panthers signed D-man Mackenzie Weegar, 26-year-old, to a 3-year deal at $3.25 average annual value. 7 goals and 11 assists in 45 games last year, and he was a 7th-round pick of Florida in 2013. So pretty notable signings there, Nick. The only 2 others that were really on the list, Dominic Cahoon signed a 1-year deal at just under $1 million for the Oilers, and Warren Fogle of the Canes signed a 1-year pact at $2.15 million. Nick, between Strome, Pulock, and Mackenzie Weegar, is there one of these that you like more than the other, or are they all pretty good signings for their respective clubs?
Well, pretty good, but the one I really like is Ryan Pulock. He's a guy that's got a lot of offensive upside, again, for the Islanders, a team certainly under Barry Trotz known for defense. Pulock, I believe, is it him, or was it, I'm trying to think of the other P defenseman that they had some injury issues, but Ryan Pulock, a good young defenseman for them. Again, good skating legs, but more on the offensive game. You saw what the amount of points that he had. Good to get that offense from the blue line, especially there with the Islanders, something that they'll need more from the upcoming season as well.
I believe, you're not thinking of Thomas Hickey, are you, by chance?
No, not Thomas Hickey.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to figure that one out later. Interested to, I don't really follow.
Is it Pollock or Pulock? I think, isn't there 2?
Well, I'm not very good with names. All I know is
not either.
I don't watch Islanders hockey that much because it reminds me of the Senators back the year they almost went to the Stanley Cup, and it kind of reminds me of Minnesota Wild hockey, a little bit boring defensively. Anyway,
a little bit.
Moving on to a team that will get Minnesota hockey fans ire a little bit, and our rivals in the Central Division, the Dallas Stars, Tyler Seguin and Ben Bishop are each expected to miss 5 months. The next 5 months here, Bishop had surgery on his right knee for a torn meniscus, and Tyler Seguin underwent right hip arthroscopy, I always struggle with that word, and labral repair. The only other injury note in the National Hockey League as well, the Columbus Blue Jackets forward Gustav Nyquist, of course, used to play with the San Jose Sharks and Detroit Red Wings, underwent surgery on Tuesday to repair a labral tear in his left shoulder, and he's expected to fully recover in 5 to 6 months. Nick, if the season starts as it's proposed to start on January 1st, do you think the combination of Tyler Seguin and Ben Bishop is really going to affect the Stars? And how much are the Columbus Blue Jackets going to miss Gustav Nyquist? Because right now, obviously, just with 2 key players, the Dallas Stars, I think, in this injury wire are really hurting.
I'll make this quick because, we have to go back onto the NHL news about their season. But I think it's important. And for the Dallas Stars, not so much Bishop, because, again, with Anton Khudobin having quite the performance that he had, but they'll definitely be missing Tyler Seguin up front and what he can bring, especially in the power play. Again, at 5-on-5, he's a guy that still has a good shot, good offensive instincts, and he really came through, especially later rounds of the playoffs, and I think that's going to be a bigger miss. And, of course, with Columbus, Gustav Nyquist, a very dynamic offensive player, and a team that, kind of assembled itself as, kind of the little engine that could. Not many bright, flashy players on it. He's maybe one of the exceptions. He'll definitely be missed on that roster as well.
That will do it for our Center Ice View news and notes. Of course, stay tuned after our interview. We're going to talk about our Mount Rushmore of hockey. Who is in your top 4 of all time in terms of the hockey world? But we're going to kick it over to a short but sweet interview that we had with a really comedic character, assistant captain of the men's hockey team, Kevin Fitzgerald. Of course, Kevin, an Illinois native, getting ready for his senior season down in the bubble in Nebraska, Omaha, in a Huskies sweater. Nick, anything to add about Kevin? This one was a really fun interview. He's kind of a guy that he's short, sweet, and to the point. Gives you a lot of information in a short amount of time.
He's a guy that I would love to have a beer with at the bar after a hockey game. He just has that very fun, very bubbly personality. A guy that smiles a lot, will crack jokes. He's a very, very fun interview, and I think that fans are going to be in for a treat this week.
I think they are as well, and we're going to hand that piece of candy off to transition from the end of October. Wow, that was absolutely terrible, wasn't it, Nick? We're going to hand it off to Kevin Fitzgerald in our Healthy Scratch interview segment.
With a new guest joining every week, it's a lineup chock full of players, coaches, fans, and more. This week's special guest is the Healthy Scratch.
And joining us this week for our Healthy Scratch interview segment, it is assistant captain and senior forward, Kevin Fitzgerald. Kevin, thanks again for joining us this afternoon. Great to have you on the podcast with us.
Thanks. I'm really excited.
Certainly. Kevin, let's walk through a little bit, I guess, to start off the bat here, named an assistant captain for this year. How does it feel to wear the A on the crest/chest area for those who pay attention to where that is on the jersey for this upcoming season that's going to be starting about 1 month from now?
Yeah, no, we're super excited for the start of the season. And it feels good. Yeah, it feels good. Wearing letters is nice, but we have a lot of leaders on our team, a ton of guys in the locker room who are leaders. We could have like 10 guys who could be wearing letters this year. So I think that speaks to the culture of our team. We're all super excited to get going, ready to get down to Omaha for the bubble.
Yeah, as Nick had kind of mentioned, your favorite place to play on the road is listed actually as Nebraska Omaha, so you should feel probably right at home. Is there anything do you go into, obviously, that December 1st start date, do you go in with any expectations being, such a unique scenario with COVID, or are you guys just kind of trying to take it one step at a time? Are there some things that you have to kind of be aware of, or is it just trying to be as fluid as you can, getting ready for NCHC action?
I mean, honestly, I wish I had an answer, but I don't know. Like, this is uncharted territory for everybody. So I guess, like you said, we're just going to try to take it one step at a time. We've got 10 games in 21 days. So I think right now it's just working our conditioning, making sure we're fresh, we're ready for the bubble. And, but once we get there, one game at a time, you're going to have a quick or a short memory down there. I guess, like, once one game's over, you take the negatives, take the positives, move on to the next game. But, I mean, we're all just so excited. I think this bubble, this whole idea is kind of just a hockey player's dream come true, getting to play 10 games in 21 days. So it's going to be all hockey all the time, also school, student athletes. But, yeah, like, we're super excited to get going.
Kevin, just a quick follow-up on that. I know that going into the bubble, the NCHC will have probably some protocols, but has your coaching staff, Brett Larson, Dave Shayak, and Nick Oliver, given you guys anything up front? I know we're still 4 weeks away, but I would imagine that they given you anything to look out for as you get closer to that date?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think now we're just trying to monitor our bodies, making sure we're getting properly recovered, because I think that's going to be such a huge advantage in the bubble is who can really, keep their legs the longest and who can be the freshest. So I think it comes from nutrition, it comes from sleep, it comes from good habits at the rink and then away from the rink too, so that we're ready to be in top physical shape when we're going in there.
So we're recording this on Monday, the night before the election, and you're a guy who's listed at 6'0", 180 pounds, a guy who's I wouldn't say undersized, but not the biggest guy in the world. If it was election night, right, and you're petitioning in your senior year to maybe try to play in the NHL or beyond this year, what would you say to the fans and to the teams? What would be your campaign speech? How would you describe Kevin Fitzgerald on this election night here?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't know. I just feel like you're talking like play style and stuff like that, right?
I think one of my favorite quotes that I found online was you said once, quote, "I think defense is something I try to excel at, though I don't like to say I do not enjoy playing offense." I'm not going to lie. That gave me a pretty good kick. I mean, yeah, you like scoring. Who doesn't like scoring, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't score a ton of goals, but I mean, obviously, who doesn't like scoring? But yeah, I mean, I think just as a player, I try to play like a two-way game, take care of my own end, whether it's playing center or wing, and then normally, like we always say, like a good defense translates to good offense. So I mean, if you look back, we've been watching a ton of film, and I feel like for me, especially, a lot of plays and stuff come from defense transitioning into offense, and then playing down low. I think a big part of my game is playing kind of down low along the walls or in the corner, getting the puck out to the net, stuff like that. But yeah, no, I mean, I just try to play, I guess, like a two-way, 200-foot game. We
recently kind of had Mike Gibbons on. I shouldn't say we kind of had Mike Gibbons. We did have Mike Gibbons on, and he talked a little bit about kind of talking about like multi-sport athletes and what it, developing as a hockey player. You were a pretty good baseball player, I believe, back in the day, and sport you'd like to try but you never have is cricket. Can you kind of explain that one a little bit as to like where cricket came from, and like were you a decent baseball player? I think, is it Hinsdale Central High School? You were a shortstop, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I played a little bit shortstop and center field, pitched a little bit. But yeah, no, I love baseball. Baseball and hockey were my two sports growing up. I played up until high school, and I think Nick Perbix wrote that I wanted to try cricket. So I don't really know much about cricket. But yeah, no, I've always loved baseball. I'm a big Chicago Cubs fan. But yeah, no, I definitely love. I don't know. I'm just a big sports guy in general. Football, basketball, baseball. Gotten into a little bit of soccer over quarantine too. So, but kind of all of them, I guess.
Is it fair to say that Nick Perbix probably wrote the rest of your junior? Your favorite book is listed as One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. I got to believe that's probably not it. But speaking of sports teams, like you mentioned, explain this one to me while we're at it. Your favorite NFL team is the Bears, but your favorite NHL team is the Red Wings. How does that come about from a guy that is in Illinois?
Yeah, that's a big thing. So I'm a big Bears fan, big Cubs fan, big Bulls fan, but I was never really a Blackhawks fan. Like when I was a kid, the Blackhawks, they weren't very good and they weren't very popular in Chicago. They had their home games were never on TV. And my mom and my dad are both from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And they were big my dad was a big Red Wings fan. And I grew up kind of in the pinnacle of their dynasty kind of coming up. So I grew up watching like Steve Yzerman, like Henrik Zetterberg, Pavel Datsyuk, Sergei Fedorov, Nicholas Lidstrom, Nick Cronwall, like all those guys. Those great teams they had. So, and that was just such a fun style of hockey too. Like they had guys who could do it all. They had that grinder line with Marty LaPointe, and then they've had the super goal scorers like Fedorov and Datsyuk. So, and that was just a style of hockey that I loved watching. So they were kind of my team.
Speaking of some past Detroit Red Wings and Nicholas Cronwall, I hate to bring this up, Kevin Fitzgerald, but you've had quite the career at St. Cloud State. But 2 years ago, you were almost pretty much Cronwalled up in Duluth. Nick Wolf was an open ice check, and I could hear it from the radio booth that it caused you to miss some significant injury to your last season there. Can you tell me what that was like? Did you know when you got hit that something didn't feel right, and how was that recovery process throughout that? So it was pretty much I think for any player, just whenever you get hit like that, instantaneously something just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't fun. But yeah, like it was weird. I kind of came back to the bench, and I kind of just felt like a little bit like of a weight on my shoulder, I guess. And I was kind of almost like, not like kidding around, but I was like sarcastically like, because Brian DeMane, our trainer's in my ear, he's like, "Hey, how you feeling?" I was like, "I think I broke my collarbone or something." And like he like kind of like moves my shoulder pad over, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we should get in there." But yeah, it was a pretty bad break. Got in there, I felt fine. Like I was like ready to go out for the third period, and then he kind of just like was like, "Yeah, you should probably like feel around." And I kind of felt around. I felt it was kind of a little messed up, and then that's kind of when like everything set in that like I needed surgery and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean the recovery and stuff. I mean it's never fun when you have to like watch your team play and watch your team practice. That's the worst part, I think, is practicing, watching the guys battle and work out and stuff like that. And you want to be out there, especially if it's a hard practice. Like you never want to watch your team go through a hard practice and stuff. But yeah, I mean I just tried to be the best cheerleader I could for those 6 weeks and get my collarbone healed up and ready to go for playoffs.
And then to follow up on that, your first game back was against Duluth back at home when you got, of course, injury occurred at Amsoil Arena back up in the Duluth there as well. When I watched you play that night, it didn't seem like you had any hesitations or, it seemed like you were ready to go. You were engaged in border battles. In fact, you had a couple of actual body checks between you and Nick Wolf. Was there any sort of like redemption that you wanted in your head, or how did it feel to get back out there against the same team that kind of knocked you out for 6 weeks?
I don't know. I mean, I think just playing Duluth is always a good game. They're a rival of ours, so I don't think it was necessarily like me versus him or me versus them or anything. I just try to like go out there and help my team win. So yeah, it was nothing really redemption wise. But yeah, I mean, I was honestly just ecstatic to get back out there after that long of waiting. So, but yeah, I mean, it was just good to get back out there.
So your journey to St. Cloud State starts obviously with the Chicago Mission. You won a national title with them, and you spent some time, pretty much 22 games played with the Topeka Roadrunners, and didn't exactly have the season in the NAHL that you had hoped for. Then you ended up in the EHL with the Vermont Lumberjacks, Tier 3 Eastern Hockey League, and your coach was actually former St. Cloud State player Doc Del Castillo, however you say it. 1990 to 1992 is when he played for the Huskies. 29 points in 70 games, not a bad cup of coffee. But you kind of really found your game, matured on and off the ice, and ended up back in Aberdeen in the NAHL for the next couple of years and really lit it up, almost a point per game player in those 2 years. When you look at that road, and we kind of had a similar thing when we talked with Jackson Castor and his journey when he went down from the USHL back down to the NA, was that a move when you look back on it and using all your years of eligibility where you wouldn't be in a St. Cloud State uniform if that hadn't happened? I mean, what was that development process like for you heading out to Vermont and playing on that team?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you guys said it best. This is the healthy scratch segment of the podcast. I think you got the right guy on here for that. But yeah, no, definitely. I was a suitcase in juniors for a bit there, and like you said, there's definitely no shot I'd be playing for St. Cloud State if I didn't use all my years of eligibility. But no, like I get asked this a lot, just about juniors and the experience because it's so unique to hockey, and honestly, like it was kind of a tough road, just being kind of bounced around, like playing in the NA for half a season and then like a month to get traded out to Vermont. But it taught me like so many valuable lessons, not only like hockey wise and determination, stuff like that, but just also about like coming to a new team, getting to know people, like kind of bringing me out of like a shell, I guess, a little bit. But yeah, and in terms of hockey, it just kind of, it kind of pushed me to a point there for a little bit. And when I was in Vermont, kind of to almost say like, is this something I want to keep doing? And then I just had to like make a decision, and kind of in Vermont is where I kind of fell in love with hockey again. Because it's hard when you're not playing, and it's hard when you're getting traded. Like it's hard to have fun go to the rink and not know if you're going to be there the next day. But yeah, Vermont is really where I fell in love with hockey again. I could skate all the time. They had a junior B team there, so I would practice the junior A team in the morning, practice the junior B team in the afternoon. So I was on the ice all the time. Then I got drafted to Aberdeen. Played there. That was a great setup. My second year there, I was reunited with my coach in Topeka, who traded me to Vermont, Scott Langer, and like I love that guy. Like he's awesome. He's been like a good mentor for me. He was a great coach. Someone that was really good for me at the time because I needed to grow up. Like when you're 17, 18, like there's no way I could have gone to college. Like, I was too immature, so I really needed to grow up there, and he helped me a lot with that.
Yeah, 84 points in 110 games in your 2 years in Aberdeen, contrasted to only 3 points in those 22 games with Topeka. So really, I'd say a stark contrast, looking pretty good. Then you end up at St. Cloud State. Kind of what brought you to St. Cloud State? You're getting ready, slated when you're in the bubble in Omaha to play in your 100th game if the trend continues, and crack 30 points career-wise. Scored your first career goal versus Boston College here at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. I mean, what brought you to St. Cloud State? Did you kind of know as soon as you came on your tour that you wanted to be here? And what was it like scoring your first goal in the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing that brought me to St. Cloud State is that it was Division I, so that was big. That was a big plus. But yeah, no, I came here on my visit, and I met with guys like the Palings and Judd Peterson and Blake Winnicky, and then I knew right away like this culture is incredible, and it's definitely something I wanted to be a part of. I was here for maybe 6 hours on my visit. I had to leave on a Sunday and then drive here. Then I had to get up at like 4 a.m. on a Tuesday and drive back and make practice. So I wasn't here for all that long, but I knew right away that this is somewhere special and somewhere that I wanted to be.
Kevin, I want to kind of bounce up on that a little bit, just because, I mean, you're upperclassman now, a senior year, and going into the pod, we know that, of course, every game is meaningful, right? But as a senior now, looking that, your career is coming to a proverbial end there with the St. Cloud State Huskies, do these games coming up, whether it's pod or no pod, mean even more to you?
Yeah, I mean, like every game means so much, and I feel like that's just like the prototypical hockey answer, like, oh, every game means a ton. But it's true, and especially this year with the shortened season, every game I feel like that means that much more. And this is such a unique experience that we're gonna be able to go through. And I just think like the team we have and with the guys like in our room, like I think this pod or this bubble is just gonna be so much fun because we're an extremely tight knit team. And I just think like the guys we have is just going to make it that much better.
So your pregame ritual when you're down in the bubble or at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, something that I actually did as a player as well, you always put the right side of your gear on before your left side. Can you kind of talk about that ritual a little bit, but more so in your 4 years at St. Cloud State, what kind of player rituals have you seen in that locker room? Have you seen some pretty wild ones, maybe some goaltenders that are doing some pretty, I might be jogging your memory a little bit, but some goalies that might be doing some pretty weird things, talking to their masks? I have no idea.
Yeah, there's definitely some, I mean, like hockey players always have their weird rituals. A funny one, like Kirby always listens to music like right up until he goes onto the ice. And I think this was at his first college game, actually. He had those beats, like the over-ear beats. And so he was listening to him, and he put his beats. He clipped him like around his thigh, like just above his shin pad, and he was sitting down, so just below his pants, just above his shin pad. And the way he tells it is that he was like, "Oh, I just put him away," because our coach came in to talk, and then he goes out for this was after warm-up, so he goes out for the game. We're like doing starting lineup and national anthem and everything, and his headphones fall off his leg, and they're on the ice, and they're like floating around. They're white, and it was like hard to see him. But yeah, we're all skating out there, and Purvy's looking down, trying to find his beats in his first college hockey game. But I thought that was pretty funny. But in terms of rituals, David Hrenik's got a couple funny ones. He's a super funny guy. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I normally do all my right side first. I normally get there early, take my sticks, like some usual stuff. Some guys, I've seen some guys the blade of their stick doesn't touch the ground, they'll flip their sticks upside down and stuff like that. But yeah, nothing I can really think of that was too crazy off the top of my head.
You mentioned David Hrenik. Maybe you and him have this in common. Is it true, one, that you can juggle? And two, if you can, I'm imagining David Hrenik probably can as well. Going into his senior season as well, how pivotal has he been for you guys' hockey team? Especially last year, but even the year before, really coming into his own Los Angeles Kings draft pick. I mean, what do you like about David? We had him on the show a couple months ago, and probably the happiest human being at any given time that we've ever seen.
Yeah, well, first off, there's nothing I don't like about David. David is the man. He's one of my best friends. Yes, we both can juggle. When I was playing Vermont, Doc Del Castillo was the one who said, if you want to get better at hockey, learn to jump rope and learn how to juggle. So right away, being a huge hockey nerd, that was I tried to master. That was my goal, to master those two things. But I'm not a master by any means, but I can juggle. But no, David is huge for us, and he's an incredible goalie, one of the best goalies in the country. On the ice, and then off the ice, he's just as big in our locker room. Like I said, we've got 10 guys who can wear a letter, and David's definitely one of those guys. He's just such a good guy in the locker room, such a big heart, and he's kind of he's a calming presence for sure. He makes sure everybody's kind of keeping it loose, but at the same time super focused. So yeah, David's a huge part of our team, not just on the ice but off the ice as well.
Kevin, you mentioned, David Hrenik, of course, talking about voices and, 10 people could have a captaincy. But is there one player maybe that sticks out in the locker room that maybe is the more vocal, maybe the more, the guy that's, trying to, rally the troops if you're down or trying to keep things calm, level-headed? Is there one guy in particular that sticks out as being kind of the voice of the team in the locker room?
Yeah, Spenny's our captain. He does a great job of kind of getting everybody on the same page. So he definitely sticks out in my mind. But at the same time, I think one of our strengths is that we have so many guys that can do that. And one thing I noticed right from my freshman year is you don't have to be a captain. You don't have to be an upperclassman or senior. It's anybody. There's freshmen, freshman, sophomore, junior, everybody. If you see something or you feel like you can provide some momentum, nobody's afraid to speak up in the locker room. And I think that's one thing that kind of makes our program what it is, I guess.
Only a couple more questions for you, Kevin. And again, thank you so much for joining us. You're listed as an accounting major. Obviously, like we mentioned plenty of times here, you are in your senior season. I know everybody wants to play hockey, but if hockey doesn't work out, what's next for Kevin Fitzgerald? I kind of chuckle seeing you as an accountant, because I feel like you'd be the prankster that would be pulling pranks all over the office. I don't know. What's next for Kevin Fitzgerald after St. Cloud State?
Well, yeah, we love pulling pranks here, and I got a couple guys pulling pranks in the doorway right now. I actually kind of, everyone says that, I don't picture you as an accountant, but I accepted a job as an associate for KPMG in Minneapolis, which I'll start next fall. So I've got that on the books. And yeah, I don't know. I'd really like to get into coaching sometime. I'm taking coaching hockey, coached by Professor Nick Tomzek, who's also our hockey ops guy here. And I really like it. I don't know. I just feel like it'd be so hard to just leave the game altogether. So I feel like I want to stay around in some capacity. But yeah, so I've got that with KPMG, which I'm pretty excited about. And hopefully some coaching in my future.
What, Kevin, I guess intrigues you about the challenge of coaching, and is there a certain age group? Have you given it much thought? And because I know that, for us, we love talking hockey. Coaching's a whole different, vibe altogether. It's got unique challenges in itself, but also can be very rewarding. If you could coach anywhere right here, right now, where would you coach? And, would you coach offense, defense? What would kind of be the thought as Kevin Fitzgerald, the coach out there for hockey?
Well, That's a good question. I think, I mean, well, you look at Minnesota and you just see this high school league that you guys have. It's incredible. Like I came up, like you said, through Chicago playing AAA, and I mean, like that was good and that was fun. It's good development route, but I don't think that there's anything better than this Minnesota high school deal that you guys got here. And I feel like that'd be that's such a good age to get into too. Like, because you're not only coaching hockey, you're kind of just molding. You're molding, younger guys, teenagers. So I think that's definitely something I would want to do. Maybe be like an assistant coach of a high school team one day. Yeah, and in terms of offense or defense, I don't know. Just nothing goalie, because I don't know anything about goalies. But yeah, I guess offense or defense. I think the thing I'm going to miss the most about hockey is just being in the locker room with the guys. And I know when you're a coach, you're not one of the boys, but at the same time, it's just that kind of camaraderie and team aspect that I think I'll miss the most.
You talk about your road. We talked about it here a little bit earlier in the segment about your road to get to St. Cloud State. If you were a coach, say, of a Minnesota high school team, would there be some lessons that you would give to young players based off of your own experience and maybe how to get to the Division I level? What was some of those lessons you might share with those younger groups?
Definitely, yeah, for sure. I would say the first thing is just, I mean, if I wanted one person to say one thing to me when I was 16 or 17 years old, it would be relax. Like, because I saw, like, so many people on my team, like, getting Division I offers or stuff like that, getting looks from junior teams. And, like, it didn't happen for me. I was, like, a third, fourth line player on my AAA team. And, like, I mean, I wasn't, like, a bad player. We had a pretty good team, like, guys who kind of went on to do some good stuff. But I would just say relax. Like, it doesn't happen immediately for everybody. Like, and at the same time, but did I deserve, like, those scholarships and junior looks? No. Like, I didn't work nearly as hard as I needed to. So I would just say, like, you got to take a good look in the mirror sometimes. Like, when you see other people and you're thinking, like, why isn't that me? Like, you got to take a look in the mirror sometimes. Like, I definitely didn't deserve it. At the same time, I wouldn't build it up. I built it up too much in my head, thinking, like, this is the end all be all, when there is time, and maybe hockey really isn't the thing, but for me, I kind of knew it was, and I just wish I realized that there is time, and I don't have to put so much pressure on myself.
Last question for me, Kevin. Speaking of relaxing, when you're not at the rink, when you're not playing hockey, you're kicking back, you're hanging with the boys. I mean, what's kind of your go-to activities? Are you a big golfer, big video game guy? Are you picking on Tyler Anderson a lot? Because that's probably what I would do if I was there. He's kind of a goofball, right? But I mean, what's kind of your go? Are you a big Chell player? Do you have a video game that you go to, or what does Kevin Fitzgerald do off the ice?
I'm not the biggest video game guy. I'm trying to think. Over quarantine, we picked up some video games, but I love playing sports and stuff with the guys. Like, we play pickleball every now and then. Or basketball or something like that. But I mostly just enjoy, like, hanging out with the guys. There's 10 guys who live at our house, and they're all in team, and so, like, we'll always be hanging out watching Netflix or something like that. Or we'll go over to other, because there's 3 main houses where all the guys in our team live within the dorms. But yeah, so we'll always, like, get together, watch football or stuff like that. But yeah, I love just watching sports with the guys and kind of chirping back and forth. I love getting on Brendan Bushy for his football hot takes. But yeah, I love my favorite thing is just spend time with the guys.
So when you mentioned Netflix, I mean, what's the go-to show for Kevin Fitzgerald? What should we be watching in the next week after election night's over?
I don't know. There's a couple of them. One of my favorite shows is Peaky Blinders, and that's what some of my roommates are watching right now. I think that one's great. I'm also a big fan of, like, any Sherlock Holmes. So, like, Sherlock, the BBC series, and then I think they just came out with, like, it was like Enola Holmes. It was like Sherlock's younger sister. I thought that was pretty good. But yeah, I love, like, mystery and stuff like that. But I love, like, the sports documentaries too. Like, The Last Dance was I'm a huge Bulls fan, so that was probably one of my favorite documentaries I've ever watched. But yeah, I guess mystery and then sports too.
So I guess so Robert Downey Jr., Sherlock Holmes, the original. What's your opinion on that one? I guess I got to ask, because that's one of my favorite movies. I like that one.
I thought that one was really good. I haven't seen that one in a long time, but I really like the Benedict Cumberbatch one. I think he's pretty funny, pretty witty, and I just love how smart he is. That's my favorite thing, is how smart, like how they're just so smart, and pretty jealous. But yeah, that's why I think it's so fun.
My last question for you, Kevin. Since you are a Bulls fan, I grew up in the 90s and, got to watch the dynasties, they call it. The age-old debate, is it Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
I don't hate LeBron James. Like, there's some guys on our team who hate LeBron James, guys who love LeBron James. I don't hate him. think he's an incredible athlete, one of the best athletes of all time. But I'm a Bulls fan. I have to be a Jordan fan. And the same – I don't know. It's hard. I mean, I definitely think Jordan, but it's hard. I never really got to see Jordan play live. But, like, the Last Dance documentary, it's hard to argue that anyone is better than Michael Jordan. But, yeah, I thought that was incredible.
Senior forward Kevin Fitzgerald again joining us this segment. And again, we appreciate you coming on, Kevin. Best of luck this season. And we'll certainly be following you as the season comes around. And again, best of luck. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much, guys. I had a blast.
Thanks,
Take
Kevin.
the Huskies Warming House podcast wherever you go. Find the newest episodes or listen to your favorite on iTunes and Podbean. Get all the latest news and updates at huskieswarminghousepodcast.com and look for our Facebook page, the Huskies Warming House Podcast, as well as our Twitter feed at Warming House Den. Our Twitter feed will host trivia, updates, and questions for fans, as well as a mailbag where you can tweet us anytime with your questions, concerns, or listener suggestion. And for business inquiries, email us at huskieswarminghousepodcast@outlook.com.
Nick, a big thanks to Kevin Fitzgerald, who, again, short but sweet, got to sit down with us. And, yeah, really fun to talk to. Unfortunately, obviously, we don't record all of our, episode. But he's a guy that if you could have listened to some of the things that, he had off air, and of course he had guys kind of cycling through of course he was doing the interview in the locker room down at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. So he had guys like Tyler Anderson and, other guys. Seamus Donahue was in there as well, coming through and just kind of messing with him a little bit. So really fun to talk to him and really appreciate him giving his time. Wishing him and the team the best of luck on December 1st in the bubble. We're going to start with kind of our marquee segment here for the day, Nick, besides our Healthy Scratch interview segment, and that is our Mount Rushmore of hockey. Again, who is in your top 4 of all time, men's, women's hockey, whatever you want it to be. This idea comes from a guy on Twitter known as @PucksOnDave. He runs a podcast called @PucksOnNetCA. It's a Vancouver Canucks-based podcast. This is where the idea comes from. He allowed us to steal it very graciously, and I thought it was kind of cool. So to give listeners a little bit of perspective here, the real Mount Rushmore for some election week history from left to right is George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. I believe George Washington was number 1, Jefferson was 3, Theodore Roosevelt was 26, and Abraham Lincoln was 16th, all in terms of the presidency numbers. That's me running off of my head, so prepare for me to be wrong. Anyway, Nick, we're going to rank ours from 4 to number 1 in terms of our hockey Mount Rushmores. What do you got for us?
So it's interesting because, I thought about this a little bit, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, got to have at least one goaltender, at least one defenseman, and probably 2 forwards. And I guess because I go back to my youth, and granted, my youth was in the Mesozoic era. It's been long before you were just a blink in your mother's eye and whatnot. So my view on hockey is a little bit different. But, I looked for who inspired me the most in those positions when I was, getting involved in the game and what inspired me to continue to play hard. We all, at least here in Minnesota, had to try at least every position, right? Even goalie. And even now and then at Open Skate here in the Twin Cities, they have a house set of pads, and I'll throw those on if I'm feeling stupid, I should say, honestly, because, who the heck chooses to dress up as a goaltender with basically no experience? Well, that's me, especially when I'm 5'9", and, I can't cover any better than that. It's quite fun. But so for goaltenders, this to me was easy. It was Eddie Belfour. And so he comes at number 4, Eddie the Eagle, former Chicago Blackhawk as well as Dallas Star. To me, he was a big part of what?
Do you know where Eddie Belfour played college hockey?
I did not, actually. Was it Boston College?
Eddie Belfour played college hockey at the University of North Dakota, believe it or not.
Did he really?
Correct.
North Dakota? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Continue.
Thanks for that, random fun fact. But, to me, I always liked his mask, number 1. I thought that was really cool. And honestly, to me, he was a clutch goaltender. I know that you have a dominator back in the day, Dominik Hasek. You have Jacques Cloutier, again, from Vancouver. You have a couple of old-school Marty Brodeurs in that conversation as well. And, of course, you can't forget about 2003 John Sebastian Shiger when he completely blanked the Minnesota Wild back to reality in the 2003 Western Conference Final. But to me, Eddie the Eagle was my goaltender in number 4. Number 3 is an interesting one, just because I don't think many people, at least around my family, would probably love that I say this. For me as defensemen, I looked at 2 parts. I looked, how were they in terms of their IQ? And 2, I always had to think of physical defensemen. It just was my thing. And this guy was a defenseman that, was he the best defenseman? No. But when he stepped in the league, when he was in Calgary, 2004, 2005, and he made his physical presence known to me, he was so fun to watch. That's Dion Phaneuf. Dion Phaneuf, when he was with Calgary, to me, was the best that he looked in his career. I know with Toronto, it's an up and down story with him, but I really liked how his physical style of play really complemented that Flame style. In fact, the Calgary Flames are one of my favorite teams to watch in that day. Really good complement of physicality and skill. To me, they're a team with Mika Kiprusoff also back in the goal between the pipes. Again, I'm really dating myself, but that's okay. At the end of it, they were just a very fun team to watch. And again, with Dion Phaneuf anchoring the back end, that's not a defenseman I ever wanted to match up against if I was coming down one-on-one. But I always kind of picture myself, to me, as the guy, especially at 5'9", and well, now I'm 5'9". Back when I was watching him, I was much shorter, much lighter, and I was basically being thrown into the boards by myself. I got to picture for myself, what it was like to be a guy that could just step up people with the blowing and just blast them into the board. So to me, that was fun. Number 1's easy for me. You probably might guess who it is. Number 2, however, yes, I knew which one I was getting at. Can I?
Yes, you can.
It's my turn, okay? So number 2 is a former Anaheim Duck, Paul Kariya. And I like Paul Kariya because, 1, not the biggest player. 2, just was a dog out there, especially in a much more physical way the game was played back in the day. He took so much of a beating, whether it was from the cross-ice hit from Scott Stevens, whether it was from just day in and day out in front of the net. He was just a bulldog. He was never really afraid. And again, off the floor, on the board, that call from Gary Thorne is just, if you're a hockey fan, it rings in your head. But Paul Kariya just epitomized what it was to be a hockey player to me. Great off the ice, very good in the community, great goal scorer. And again, he didn't let his size overcome the type of game that was played back then, much more physical. And to me, I kind of looked up to him at that point, just because, when you're trying to look for someone that you model your game up, you look for someone at least I think gets close to your stature. And for me, Paul Kariya was that. So that's number 2. Number 1.
I just wanted to mention, not to interrupt you, but that Paul Kariya.
I'm getting used to it by now.
That Paul Kariya goal, off the floor, on the board, Paul Kariya, and obviously would never happen by today's concussion protocol standards. But have you ever watched, a clip, a movie, a highlight, whatever it is, and no matter how many times you watch it, it's a movie where you know the ending, essentially, right? It gives me goosebumps every time. I don't know if that is for you, but for me, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. I mean, it is just that good. Gary Thorne, how lucky was he, 1, that Paul Kariya buried that goal, but then how lucky was Paul Kariya, 1, to be alive, but 2, to be on that play as well. I'm interrupting you because I'm really stoked that you made that choice, because I think for a lot of people, that's just such an iconic goal. That will live in infamy forever.
It really will. And again, the emotional release, again, you got hit. And at that time, it was a clean hit. Scott Stevens, that was the way he played. You never wanted to go across the ice. Let me rephrase it. It was a clean hit in terms of department player safety. Was it maybe late? 100%, but no call was made. And at that point, again, in hockey, it was more about, okay, you have to brush it off. If the refs are going to call it, you got to get revenge back on the score sheet. Paul Kariya came back out in that game and blasted that slap shot past the Marty Brodeur there. And again, just you could see in his face that he wanted that so bad, and it was an absolute bullet to the far glove side there of Marty Brodeur.
And he doesn't remember Game 7 too. Interestingly enough, 3 nights later, doesn't remember that entire week. So crazy.
Pretty crazy story, but inspirational nonetheless, right? Number 1, definitely the player that I most looked up to. Number 9, former North Star number 1 overall pick in 1988, I believe, or 87. It was Mike Modano. Michigan native, again, played with speed, played with poise, captain of the team, could score. But just a guy that, again, one good thing as a small player that I grew up is that you can generally outskate most everybody. There's nothing more that I like to watch than the jersey that was flapping behind Mike Modano when he was flying up the ice. It was just almost at the time no one that could stop him. And now if you were to put him back, 20 years and put Connor McDavid, he would look like a freaking snail. It's just amazing how the game has progressed. But back in the day, he was the penultimate skater on the ice and a clutch player as well. I loved his leadership. I loved his skill set, and it seemed like he just always made the right plays and did not get a chance to meet him. But my dad, when I was 4 or 5 years old, he was working downtown Minneapolis and actually got to meet him. He actually bought a hat for me and then had Mike Modano sign it. I still have it sitting up in my closet, and that was the first big prize hockey memorabilia that I have, along with my first North Star jersey that was made. So pretty cool. That's my list. I imagine your list might be quite different, but that's my Mount Rushmore hockey. So Modano, Korea, and I'm going to forget Phaneuf, and then again Eddie the Eagle.
Yeah, Mike Modano, of course, now with the Minnesota Wild in terms of their front office as well. I really liked Mike Modano's game. I used to have one of those, knee hockey sticks that had a Mike Modano kind of mural of sorts on there, and I skated the crap out of that thing, for lack of a better term. So no, I really like your list. Your list is this is going to be weird. Your list was actually much more modern than mine, and the reason I say that is because when I was thinking about my list, I thought about who really kind of kept the game of hockey intact. Because you think about the game of hockey, obviously, starting in the late 1800s, it was really in flux until, when people think of the original six, they think of, the 1940s and the 1950s, the big heyday of the original six. It was a really tumultuous time to get the National Hockey League to that level. So for me, I kind of thought about people that brought the NHL there. And then, of course, some obvious ones there. I have an honorable mention to start off my list, Nick. And the reason I have an honorable mention is because on my list as well is Wayne Gretzky. I don't think Wayne Gretzky needs any explanation, so I included an honorable mention here. My honorable mention is Foster Hewitt. And if anybody knows, Foster Hewitt was the play-by-play voice for Hockey Night in Canada way back in the day for 40 years, which at the time it was called the General Motors and Imperial Oil Unlimited Hockey Broadcast before going to TV in 1952 and sticking with it, until 1958 when he handed it off to his son. He was part of the opening night ceremonies for the Maple Leaf Gardens in 1931. And you think about broadcasting gondolas, if you will, essentially the press box as we call it today. Those plans were put in with his input and talking with Toronto Maple Leafs owner Conn Smythe, which Conn Smythe is going to play a little bit more of a role into my list as we go down here, because I have an interesting story about that. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think it pays homage to us as media guys. We don't get a chance to do this, and hockey play-by-play isn't what it becomes without a guy like Foster Hewitt. Coming in at my list at number 3 is Maurice Richard. If anyone has seen The Rocket, the movie The Rocket, you might have to watch the dub version, of course, because it is in French originally. Of course, won 8 cups with the Montreal Canadiens, starting his first game in 1942. If you know anything about Maurice Richard, he was an outspoken, very intense guy from a very impoverished area and worked his butt off for everything that he earned. Very physical, very kind of a violent player in a lot of senses in terms of the way he played. His most notable claim to fame is that on-ice incident that is depicted in the movie during the 1954 season when he punched a linesman. Essentially, he was being held back and couldn't really get himself free and punched a linesman, and the president at the time, which would be Clarence Campbell, suspended him for the remainder of the season and playoffs. That led to the Richard riot in Montreal, which is a pretty tumultuous time for the Montreal area, and ended up being for Ontario and Quebec as well. I mean, it's amazing how much hockey can influence here. And we'll get back to the Montreal Canadiens and how they actually became to be in my story here. Coming in on my list as well, Nick, Hayley Wickenheiser. We're going to stay up in Canada, arguably regarded as the greatest female ice hockey player of all time. And I think that the women's game just doesn't get enough love. She's currently the assistant director of player development for the Leafs, spent 23 years for the national team in Canada until 2017 as a player, and claim to fame, first woman to play full-time in professional hockey in a position other than goalie. So much you can say about her, and I just believe that she had to be on this list. The reason I'm not giving her enough time here is because my number 1 pick here is going to be kind of odd, and I don't think a lot of people are going to know this, but it does happen to actually go back to The Rocket, and it goes back to Conn Smythe, and it's a guy by the name of Dick Irvin, who was the coach, when Maurice Richard is in the movie for the Montreal Canadiens, he was a guy in real life. And of course, he played in the National Hockey League and then ended up coaching. So what in the heck does this guy who was born way back in the day, before even Nick's time, have to do with hockey and Noah Grant's Mount Rushmore? Why is this guy on my list? Well, he was born in Hamilton, Ontario, 10 children, 6 boys and 4 girls. 2 of the boys died in infancy and all 4 girls died of tuberculosis. So very interesting start to his life. His father would drive the remaining sons and other boys to games, hockey games, by horse and sleigh, relying often on the horse's sense of direction to get them through the blizzards that were often common in that time period. So, I mean, you talk about a blizzardy drive in your Honda Accord to the rink. Try this one out. The family flooded their driveway of their home to create an ice rink, and he also set up a shooting area in his house where he would shoot at an old doorknob and a broken door in his backyard to practice the game of hockey. He played junior and senior hockey in Winnipeg, winning the Allen Cup in 1915, and made it to the NHL at this one, Nick. There's still hope for you. Made it to the NHL at age 34. With the Chicago Blackhawks. So you're all set there. 2 years later, his career was ended as a player. He fractured his skull and retired. So yeah, very, very interesting. So this is where our story really gains traction and comes back to the Montreal Canadiens and Conn Smythe. So Irvin coached the Hawks to a Stanley Cup in his first season as a coach, but he was not re-signed by Chicago after winning a Stanley Cup in his first ever coaching season. So he was picked up by Toronto owner Conn Smythe. He won a cup in his first season and had 6 cup final appearances in his next 10 seasons. Then he was convinced to coach Montreal, who had just suffered, to this point, it is still their worst winning percentage in franchise history, 10 wins on the season, and they were looking for a new coach. And knowing that the Canadiens were in serious straits off the ice and on it, Toronto manager Conn Smythe suggested that the Canadiens hire Irvin. Well, why were the Canadiens in such tumultuous straits? Well, the funny story about this, Nick, is that the Montreal Canadiens almost did not stay in Montreal. Think about the Montreal Canadiens, 24 Stanley Cups, the most iconic hockey franchise of all time, almost ended up in Cleveland, of all places.
Of all the places to end up, too.
Yeah, very interesting. In 1935, of course, as you can imagine, the economy, right, was in shambles because of the Great Depression and everything that was going on, and then followed by a world war a couple of years later. It should come as no surprise that many of those professional sports teams, were in trouble. So as a result, the Montreal Canadiens, their 2 owners, had been criticized for not being invested in the team to begin with, but they almost took that offer to relocate the team to Cleveland. Instead, those ownerships and rights were sold to the Montreal Maroons. And if you think back, Montreal, 2 teams, the Canadiens and the Maroons, and at the time they're sharing, obviously, that market. Which, of course, challenges those financial woes, because if you have 2 teams in Montreal, you can only go see one on a given night if they're playing on Friday. So, at the time, the New York Herald Tribune noted that Montreal itself, in terms of a city, was losing interest in professional hockey, and the city could not support 2 teams. So one team, once that sale was done, only one team could stay by the end of this decade, by the start of 1940, and the Montreal Maroons had just won a Stanley Cup in 1935. So all bets are thinking the Montreal Canadiens are not going to stay there, right? They're going to fold. The Montreal Maroons are going to stand as Montreal's only team. Well, who was the savior? None other than Toronto Maple Leafs owner Conn Smythe, who led a movement within the NHL, talking to Clarence Campbell, to veto at this time the Canadian Arena Company's attempt to fold the Montreal Canadiens. He won over the league government, and he thought that the Canadiens were one of the most distinct franchises in the league, and the Maroons would fold in 1938 because they folded when Dick Irvin took over in 1940, who then immediately turned the ship around with the addition of Maurice Richard and the punchline in 1942, winning a couple cups and turning the Montreal Canadiens into a dynasty that we know today with 24 Stanley Cups. That's probably a lengthy, kind of boring radio-style drama story, whatever. But I think about how different the National Hockey League landscape would be, or if the NHL would even remotely exist, if the Montreal Canadiens disappear, if it wasn't for the work of Dick Irvin, guys like Conn Smythe, and players like Maurice Richard. For me, and I know that was very Montreal Canadiens heavy, but for me, I just think about, you and I get excited to jump on the ice on a Saturday night in a game of pickup hockey. Rinks might not even exist if the Montreal Canadiens head off to Cleveland. I don't know. I don't know how you're feeling. I don't know if I lulled you to sleep or if you're stunned with the ridiculousness of that, but
a little bit of both. No, I'm kidding. It's been a very long it's been a long Friday to say the least. But it's interesting that you mention some of the. I mean, we know hockey right now in terms of North America is number 4 in terms of the 4 professional sports, right? And it's always good to remind ourselves that even back then, it still was a very fragile league. And even, like you said, Montreal is, I did radio in Montreal for, a couple of years, and the passion they have for the game, it's considered the mecca of hockey, right? And if that was Cleveland, I mean, what would the Cleveland Browns be? Would they even care? Would hockey in the United States be a much different animal than it is today? There's so much history that could have changed with that. So it's a very interesting story. And I think it's a lot of it that a lot of hockey fans, especially in the U.S., don't know. Just really that, yes, it's Canada's game, and this is why. They really pulled every loop in the book to get a franchise to stay. And now, again, 24 Stanley Cups, there's no team that comes close to it. Plenty of wild connection. Again, Jacques Lemaire and Mario Tremblay, former winners as players as well as coaches. Again, just plenty of history with that franchise.
To kind of recap this too, I think it's interesting. The New York Herald Tribune or whatever it was, had interviewed the 2 owners of the Montreal Canadiens at the Times, and I looked at their names and I can't say them for the life of me, so I'm not going to read them. But it's interesting that they commented, back in the day, Montreal did not have this interest in hockey. And you think, as you just mentioned, the Bell Center, Montreal Canadiens, the mecca of the hockey world. And I think back to the movie, and one of my favorite quotes is when the character who plays Dick Irvin says, the league, the NHL, it's this close to folding. And he's like, make this game exciting. And you talk about how, you had guys like Maurice Richard, and then along comes Bobby Orr, and guys that become these iconic players that push us into the 70s. Then you have, the Philadelphia Flyers and the Broad Street Bullies. And then you start to have these real superstars come out in the 80s. And then guys get their first $1 million contract. I think, was it Brett Hull or Bobby Hull was the first player who played for the Jets, was the first player to get a $1 million contract. And that was the big deal. And now you look at guys like Alex Ovechkin, they're on the cover of a video game. NHL 94 just got a reboot this year. And you just think about, all that might have never happened if these 2 owners would have taken the original $400,000 deal to send the Montreal Canadiens off to Cleveland. I love stuff like that. I think it's mind blowing. I don't know how many listeners of ours are asleep by now, but I don't know.
Something to check the analytics. But with that, Noah, I think that does wrap up this week's episode. Again, just a reminder for our listeners that next week we will have trivia, but we will be taking a week off in preparation for some bigger and better things to come from the Huskies Warming House podcast. For Noah Grant, I'm Nick Maxson saying so long, and we will see you in 2 weeks.